Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start. I suppose these stragglers will come in. My name is Fran Quinlan. I'm the co-chair of the Resource Development Team for the Ohio Meadville District. So some of the things that we do, you will have found in your folder, besides workshops on stewardship. We do the chalice sliders and the Friends of the OMD, the people in the St. Lawrence District. I apologize for that plug. You can also sign up for chalice sliders at Diane's table that's in the foyer. And some of the members that are of our team that are here this afternoon are Diane, he's the greeter, and I guess going to be the timekeeper too. And Tricia is on our panel. We light this chalice with the mission of the Resource Development Team in mind, to inspire the spiritual practice of generosity and stewardship in our work as UUs. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen. Together, our vision widens and strength is renewed. Thank you. We're together today to explore mission budgets. What are they? And why use them? There are mechanics to using a mission budget, but also reasons akin to theology. Our panelists have vast experience in funding the visions of their congregations and our denomination. Now let me introduce them to you. We have Reverend Patricia Hart, is a Unitarian Universalist minister and consultant, whose work is focused on change and growth in congregations. In addition to almost 2 decades as a congregational stewardship consultant, Patricia has served 7 congregations in New England, Pennsylvania, and Appalachia as parish minister. She is currently interim minister at the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Charleston, West Virginia. Marion Yeagler has been a member of the UU Church of Kent for 24 years and is a past member of the board of that congregation. Stewardship and membership fellowship are her areas of passion. She is currently serving as a trustee on the Ohio Meadville District Board. So Marion, did you identify yourself? Mark Tomlinson is currently a trustee at Allegheny UU in Pittsburgh and president of the New Pittsburgh Cluster. He is the immediate past president of the congregation and also a former stewardship chair. When we are done here, he is leading the workshop, Is Your Congregation Technologically Literate? He's a technical consultant and a whiz at all things computer. And a very generous soul because he stepped in at almost the last minute when a panelist had a family crisis. The Reverend Lynn Kerr is the minister of Maumee Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Bowling Green, Ohio, a consulting minister of First Universalist Church of Lyons, Ohio, and is currently serving as the Ohio Meadville Ministerial Settlement Representative. She has also held positions as a hospice chaplain, youth minister, minister of religious education, and a fundraiser for the UUA. There they are, your panelists. And we thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. We're going to start, and we're going to save the questions and feedback and thoughts that you have for the end. So if you have something pressing, write it down, save it for the time that we'll have at the end for that part. Okay. Mission budget teaser, let's go.
So thank you, Fran, for your introduction and even more for putting this panel and this workshop together. I'm leading a workshop later on this afternoon as well. It's the Beyond the Pledge Drive workshop, and I did that as a Lone Ranger. Wait, there's a workshop I should be taking. It's harder to do things collaboratively. It takes more time, and it's good, and it's better. So I just want to thank you, Fran, for all the work that you've done on that. So a couple of questions for all of you, though we want you to save your substantive questions for later. I've got a couple of questions just to figure out who's in the room. How many of you have ever worked on putting together a budget for your congregation? I'm just looking to see if there are any hands that are not up. There are a couple of hands that are not up. Perhaps by choice. No, maybe not.
I haven't been there a long time.
How many? What's your absolutely favorite thing about congregational budgets? Just call out. What's great about the budget?
Being finished.
Line items. We have a vote for line items on the budget. What's great about the budget?
Letting people know that the church is okay.
Letting people know that the church is okay. Anxiety is not a word that we're going to spend a lot of time with, but let's just acknowledge money, anxiety go together, so it's always there in the background, and budgets can help. Good. What else is good about budgets?
Income.
Income. We like to look at the top part of the budget, not always so much the bottom half. Yeah. What else?
I'll throw in transparency.
Transparency. So in the sense of nothing's hidden. It's all there in the budget. Okay. Yep.
Predictability,
Predictability, meaning
that once you have the number, the amount that's coming in, you know that it's coming in and you can predict then. I mean, it's kind of like,
I hope it's coming in.
I love the sound of that the budget, the numbers on the budget have reality and we can trust them, and that's sometimes true and sometimes not.
It shows how much work you have to do.
You know, it is. It's like a document which says people are taking this congregation seriously, taking its financial stability seriously. So sometimes a few more line items can seem to underscore that. Yes?
It's also a chance to reevaluate, I don't want to say the bigger mission, but where you're putting your resources.
Oh, thank you. I didn't even pay you to do that because it's such a perfect segue to this question, this topic of mission-based budgeting. There's, oh golly, I was going to remember this. A phrase coined by Michael Doral, who's one of the people who's been writing about stewardship and congregations for decades now. He says, we really ought not ever to use the phrase operating budget. We ought to call it the functional picture of the mission. He has a more succinct phrase than that. Do you remember what it is, Pat, by any means? But the point is, a budget, in all of its transparency and its detail, ought to be, always is, a picture of a congregation's priorities, because it's the story of how the congregation is allocating its resources. We don't always look at it that way. We don't always analyze it that way, but that document, which I always remind finance committees and boards, that document needs to stand alone. It, whatever you attach it to, whatever's in it, it can travel and will travel. And as it travels, it tells a story of what a particular congregation thinks matters in the world. So this really not very complicated, but sometimes challenging to do, idea of putting together a budget which tells that story about your congregation's priorities and mission. That's what we're talking about this afternoon. And you are lucky because you've got 3 people who've done this in, I think it's true, different ways. Are going to be talking to you this afternoon about how they took on this project of how do we have the budget, how do we have the money of the congregation tell the story about what the congregation's mission is. How many of you have actually been involved with putting together something that everybody acknowledges is a mission-based budget? not quite so many hands up, but a few. Those of you who've done that, just throw this out quickly. What's theological about this?
What's the question?
Hi, Peter, I'm glad that you're here. What is it, if we decide that it matters to do the budget of the congregation in a way that reflects and tells the story of the mission, what's the theology behind that, or what's the theological message? Art?
Usually the biggest chunk is worship, minister, to focus on that idea of what the church is for.
So in that way, it tells the story. This is an organization that focuses on mission, on worship and ministry. That's certainly clear. Peter, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, it correlates raising money with what the church is about and what it's for,
Yes.
which hopefully resonates better with people when you're asking them for money.
Okay, I'm going to try to say that again. It makes a correlation between money and what the congregation is for,
Yep.
which first of all, and not last point, but first of all, means that when you're asking people to give money to support that budget, you're able to talk about that in a way that is talking about what the congregation is for, the congregation's purpose. That matters for all kinds of reasons which you can think about, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more about this afternoon. The thing that I want to say to you, I have been doing, as Fran said, I've really been doing congregational ministry for almost 30 years as a lay leader before I went to seminary, and now for almost 20 years as a parish minister. And I've been, because how many of you have ever served on the Canvas team, the Stewardship Committee, the people who do the pledge drive? Okay, yeah, well that's how I got started too. I became fascinated by all of this. And even after all those years, it has only recently become clear to me with something of an unpleasant shock that we, in a variety of ways, through our habits and our traditions and our systems, we try to segregate money in our congregations from the stuff that really matters to us. The heart stuff, the really thought-provoking, what is the mission, what are we individually doing? We try to keep money away from that because of an unarticulated but sometimes very strongly held fear that it will pollute it, that money is corrupting. Money reduces things to numbers. All this stuff is not well thought out or articulated, but we're pretty good at segregating money. Think about pledge season, or as in a congregation I served where we finally got rid of the pledge drive, we decided that we gave ourselves back 3 months. We didn't, and we did. That's not why we changed it, but that's what happened because of the anxiety that comes with money, which was making it hard to think about other things. So I just throw that out to you. That why do a mission budget? For a whole bunch of reasons. It may well be easier to raise money that way because it tells the story more effectively, but maybe fundamentally because it knits the parts and pieces of your congregation more closely together than we have allowed them to be in the past. Oh, 1 minute. Good, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Tricia.
Hi, I'm Marion Yeagler from Kent, Ohio. You know, when I go to a workshop like this, I want the nuts and bolts of how do you get there from here. So just let me tell you that this year we're in our 4th year of using what we call a program-based budget, but it's mission-based budget, same thing. And we realized that people give to change lives, not to pay the electric bill. The first year we used our program-based budget, we saw a 13% increase in pledges. In subsequent years, the increases have been smaller, but we haven't had to go back to the congregation, begging to close the gap, which we have done in a variety of ways in the past. We just haven't had to do that, which is a really good feeling. When we decided, some of our staff and leadership came back to the church with some brochures from other churches that were using program-based budgets. And we decided that we wanted to do that. And our staff had a big part in making that happen. So we based what we have right now on those brochures, and we customized it to fit our church. In the fall, toward the end of the year, the staff does a week-long time study. Like every 15 minutes, what areas of programming do they spend their time on? And our congregational administrator, Mary Beth Hannon, and she's agreed, if you want some help to go from a line item budget to a program-based budget, she's listed on this resource material, and she said she's willing to tell anybody, how to get there if you'd like to do that. So she translates that data into percentages for each program area. And there's also, if you go to this surgeUUA.org On-Demand Learning Center, there's going to be an example of the brochure, the minister's letter, and the pledge card that we mail out in probably at the end of February. We mail out a packet to everybody in our congregation who has either pledged or given on a regular basis. We don't send it to the other people. We don't want to bother them, we're just going for the people that are already giving regularly. And that's one of the ways that we communicate. Then we have articles for a couple of months, and then during the pledge drive in the monthly newsletter. And we have a weekly electronic newsletter, and we start putting weekly articles there. And every week, once we get into the campaign, which is usually the entire month of March, yeah, so you're talking about 3 months. So we're looking at a good 3 months. So I'm real interested in your workshop. But if people give us permission, every week in the order of service, we have what's called the thread from the web, and we list the names of the people who've pledged that week, which little nudge to everybody else. So look at, I pledged. And we have a stewardship table after every service during coffee hour also. Testimonials during the service, every service in March. And then our canvassers are trained to not only talk about usually we're asking for an increase in pledges because, we always want to do more. But when our canvassers make those calls, we try to take advantage of that time to talk to people and find out how they're feeling about the church, if there's something they think that we could do better, what they like about what we're doing. We have a whole training program that we give to all the canvassers. Now this is, we used a pie theme. So we used that for the first 3 years in a variety of ways. There was, of course, the pie chart, and we had pies at coffee hour, and we celebrated with pie for everybody. One year we used the, the mathematical pie, and we went on that. And this year we decided they were getting tired of the pie theme, so this year it was raising the bar, and we used bar charts instead of a pie chart. But I think that this visual the pie chart is really a good visual. You can see that we have, what we decided were these program areas. So we showed how much of, based on the time study that was done, we translated that to each of these program areas and what percentage of the budget goes to those program areas. Social justice, UU interfaith, worship and music, community within, lifespan learning and spiritual growth, and income generation. Now, people ask about the income generation in particular, and that takes into account the time that our administrator has to spend tracking pledges, you know, sending out statements. That's all very time consuming. So that's why, and actually I think 11% is not bad if you, you look at charities and you know what they all aim for. So then on, for each one of those program areas, then there's another page that breaks out the individual area. So the one that the slide that I sent is for worship and music in particular. So we listed, I mean, look at that long list of things that can be considered to be in that program area. And I like to tell people to keep this brochure, and if you have any questions, in particular visitors, you know, what does the church have available? This is really a nice way, this is a good tool for them to see things that they might be interested in being involved in. And then they can contact someone and ask about it. And then on each page, we try to put the little facts, you know, just something to think about that might be important to that area. And then at the bottom of that fact block there, an increase in donations will allow us to respond to requested increases for the music program and the Sunday program committee. So our music program at Kent is very important to, you know, both the people who've been there for a long time, and sometimes that's what brings the visitors in and keeps them there. So, and then, you know, if you're very interested in music, maybe that will make you think about increasing your pledge. So, because we wanted an accompanist for we don't have one. So we have to fund one. So that's one of the things we wanted an increase for. Then the last visual I wanted to show you was that we also make a point of showing that our pledges are our main support. So the big blue area is pledges, and then the rest of it comes from us also, but in a lesser amount. And, you know, we try to show and explain how important pledges are in funding the programs that people think are important. I did bring, now this is not the bar chart, I mean the pie chart brochure that we send out, but I only brought about 10 of these. So if you can't get online and get a copy of it on the Surge link, feel free to come up and take these. There's Melissa's letter. Now this year we sent the same letter to everyone because it's very time consuming for Melissa to compose, and she was really busy. In the past we've tried to send a separate letter to different groups like people who weren't pledging and people in the different quartiles. We would send a targeted letter. But this year we went just with the generic letter, and then we also had a copy of the pledge card in the packet that we sent to everyone. So I think that about does it. Be happy to answer any questions later.
I still have your pamphlet with the pie symbol on the front of my dining room table somewhere, so there's lots of sharing going on over the years with learning about stewardship. So none of us are experts at making slideshows. So I threw some things on slides, I'll show you in a minute, but I also fortuitously received a fundraising email this week from an organization that I support, and I wanted to share that with you. I'm the parent of a 5-year-old, so some of you will understand how passionate I am about Save the Gruffalos, as the organization. They're such a majestic animal. We read about them all the time and hope to have a chance to see them one day in the wild. And here's the appeal that I got. Dear generous supporter, we are writing to thank you for your support and to remind you it is time to make your annual donation. It is a very challenging financial period for us. The roof leaked in February and required costly emergency repairs. We have a big staff and gave everyone a cost of living increase this year. As everyone knows, healthcare costs are rising astronomically. Our insurance expenses skyrocketed after the unfortunate incident during our August safari. But we are pleased to report that Ranger Jane is recovering and is almost 100%. On our website, you can view a spreadsheet of our line item budget that has all of the details, everything from how much we paid for organic coffee to what we spent for copy paper. We are grateful that we can rely on your support again this year. And then a PS, 20% of last year's donors have decided to drop their support, so please increase your donation by 20%. So this was not really much of a creative writing exercise. Most of us have probably received a letter like that from our churches. In fact, some of us may have sent that letter, something very much like it. What it doesn't have in there, it doesn't have mission, it doesn't have ministries, there's no heart in it, right? So you just can't throw financial information at people and expect them to respond, for it to have any meaning for them. So this was a process that we started moving from the line item presentation to mission-based budgeting about 4 years ago at Allegheny. A couple things came together at the same time. Stewardship Committee was reading about it, learning about it, thinking about it. There was also a growth and vitality initiative through the district that some may have participated in. That group brought that energy back. Let's talk about this in a mission-based way. We were also doing a pretty big change at the time to full-time ministry, moving our minister from 3/4 to full-time. And so the last item here at the bottom, when you look at a line item budget, a full-time minister costs $70,000. That's negative information, you know? That's a cost. A mission-based budget is positive. You know, it's about the things you're going to accomplish with that money. It's about the mission areas. And so being able to move the congregation to being willing to support a full-time minister was very helpful to be able to talk about mission-based budget. There's a mention here of Wayne Clark had a post in 2009 on one of the UA blogs, which I just looked up again the other day. It's still there. You can Google that, find it pretty easily. Say yes to pie charts and no to line items. We followed it really fairly closely, and if you look at that, I mean, his graphs look just like ours ended up looking. The categories look the same and very similar to what Marion presented. You know, it was really clearly explained, you know, why it was important, how it could help. Spreadsheets are just hard for people to understand, even if they have had financial training and can look at spreadsheets, can look at financial reports. When you throw it on a screen like this and give them 30 seconds and say, are there any questions? Just doesn't happen. That doesn't work. So these are the expense categories that we used, very similar to the ones that Marion showed. The three biggest ones to me, and again, you're talking about the minister's salary is over 50% of our budget. So being able to divide the minister's time into worship, being able to divide the minister's time into social justice, community outreach, and the areas that our minister works in was very helpful, and not showing that as a salary expense, but as a mission expense. This is the graph, again, very similar, but all these graphs will look similar once you break them out like this, right? Instead of having 60 or 70% of it showing as salaries, now it shows as worship, music, lifespan faith development, social justice. It was a really simple process for us. It literally happened in a restaurant, at a table, napkin, pencil, calculator. And you know, what Wayne Clark points out is your line item budget doesn't go away. It still exists because you've still got to do the budgeting using either, whether it's a spreadsheet or QuickBooks or a financial management system, whatever you use. The process is translating that into the mission budget. So it is a process of going through, doing the math, of figuring out how the staff allots time, figuring out how things like insurance or office expenses or other things divide into program areas. I like to say leave room for new ideas that bubble up. Sometimes budgeting should never just be about what you did last year and transitioning it to this year. Maybe there are things you want to do this year that have never been done before. Simplifying information and how you communicate it is always helpful. The visuals, the charts, and the graphs create sort of simple things that people can take in quickly, and it's a process you have to redo every year because the underlying information is going to change. You're going to present a new snapshot every year. So a stewardship perspective on all of this. People give from the heart, not the head. They always want to know, does their giving make a difference? What is it helping us do? They don't do utility bills. They will give to sustain a vital community, providing things they value, spiritual home, social justice, changing lives. Always talk about mission, and when the budget materials can reflect that also, then your stewardship materials and your budget stuff is going to sync up. Donors need to be able to trust leadership and fiscal practices. So, that can be a real process for some congregations. We are just moving this current fiscal year off of spreadsheets into a financial management system. And to us, that feels like a really big step in building trust in how we're doing our job. There's a note here at the bottom about appreciative inquiry. If folks have taken stewardship training through the district, you've probably heard about this, but I really suggest appreciative inquiry is something to learn about. It is a way of not looking at your, and maybe Scott's talk this morning reflected a little bit, it's a way of not looking at your world as problems, but looking at it as opportunities. And I think it does a really good job when you're looking at budget and financial information and stewardship about getting yourself into a good mindset for that. And finally, I don't know if you can read it all. I did attach a letter at the end that was a sample of some of our materials. So this was the fundraising letter that went out with our campaign the first year that we used this mission budget. And I hope that's a little bit maybe not so legible for folks. But it'll be in the presentation that goes on the website. And so I think we managed to make it all the way from the beginning to the blessings part at the end, staying in a mission context and staying in a positive mission. Here's what we're accomplishing. Here's how your money is being used, and never sort of falling back into talking about just numbers. So I also just wanted to reflect that sometimes it feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You have to do this every year. Your budget, I think by default, wants to look like last year's budget, plus 5%. So things just get more expensive every year. And it's also a whole different thing. So talking about this in a stewardship context is one thing, but we get together once a year for an annual meeting, everybody in one room, and getting a finance committee, getting a treasurer to present information that way can sometimes be more challenging than just convincing a stewardship committee to talk about it that way. There has been somewhat of a tendency to revert. We talk about it in the positive way one year, and the next year we want to throw the spreadsheet and the line item back up because it's easier. It takes time to do it the other way. Those are the things that I wanted to add to the discussion today, and I may not be here for the whole question and answer session because I'm doing another seminar, but I think my name is going to go on as a resource that if folks want to chat after today's session, would be glad to just brainstorm with you and talk about how we did ours and how you might do something like this at your congregation.
Okay.
Well, the first thing that I want to tell you is that in my congregation, I have been a farmer, I have been Snow White, I have been Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, and this year I'm going to be posing as a storyteller. And I tell you this because those are all characters. And for us, our budget tells a story. It's not just numbers, it's not just figures, it tells a story about our congregation. And so in all of our stewardship efforts, we have told a story about our congregation, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more. And so in our pledge campaigns, I have been a character in a story. So those are just a few that I have been. If you want to see pictures, I'll show you. We are a small congregation, not quite 100 members at this point. We are beginning our 4th year of mission-based budgeting. When I came in 4 years ago, we started. And they were at a 98% rate of payment on their pledges. Okay, that means that out of all the pledges people gave, 98% of it was paid. Incredible number, okay? So people were confident that they were giving to something good. But it didn't pay all the bills. It didn't cover a 3/4 time minister, which they had hired for the first time, or called me. It also didn't cover a DRE. So I came on, and they knew the old way wasn't working because it wasn't going to happen. They had a change in a minister. They had a change of focus. We were now going to focus on ministry and Sunday mornings and not lay leadership as much. There was a change in energy. We have a new minister. This is a time to draw people in, to call people that haven't been here for a while and say, hey, come on in. There's something new happening. And it was time for a change. So that was why we decided to try something new. The philosophy going into this was that we needed to decide what are we here for. And we decided, probably much like any of you, we are in the business of changing lives. So what does that mean? We got together and said, okay, what do our people need to know? Well, first of all, for them to invest in our mission, they need to believe in it. They need to trust the leaders. They need to know that if they do fund this budget, that the staff and the Board of Trustees are going to be responsible. They also want to know that what they're doing is important work. Now, we still have to pay the light bills. We know that. We have to heat the building. We have to get a person to plow the snow. We know all of that. That's not so sexy, right? Those are not sexy things, but we know they have to be done. But when you put them in context of the story of your congregation, it makes all the difference, and that's why mission budgets work, if it's attached to your mission. So, how did we start? And before I get into any more detail, of course, all of our congregations are different, so what you're hearing from all of us today, these things worked. Maybe you'll find a little bit from me and a little bit from here and a little bit from there, so all of us are different, right? So I would really encourage you to kind of, just like you use them in general, take what serves you and, and make it your own. So unfortunately, yes, meetings. There was a lot of that at the very beginning when we first started. We had focus groups. We had all the committees get together and say, what is your purpose? Then we did, we had the whole group, the whole congregation do a mission statement. Then we did a survey of the entire congregation to find out what is most important to you. And then you can see under Finance Committee and Board of Trustees the other things that we did. And all of this is going to be available. And I also have materials to go with all of these things on the materials that we're supplying, so you'll get that. The next thing that I wanted to tell you is that with the Finance Committee, they looked at the survey, they looked at the budgets, and similar to what you all were saying, they took all those things and translated it into percentages and figured out how much, you know, by prior spending, long-range plan, all of that, they used that to translate it into what we did. Then it went to the Board of Trustees, and it eventually went to our annual meeting. So that was like the first year, okay? So how did we communicate this? Well, of course, the first time you communicate, we're talking mostly Canvas, right? Although it started with the mission, with making our mission statement. So year one, it was called Inch by Inch. And what's most important about this is that we said, what's different about this year? And that's how we introduced our mission-based budgeting. And we looked at our accomplishments. That was the first thing we've done on every single mission-based budget. What are our accomplishments? And look at what we could achieve with X, Y, or Z. And the bottom line was desire, determination, and leadership. We understand what's important to you because we did this survey. And then you can see year two was there's no place like home. So I'm just giving you these ideas of kind of the themes of kind of how we went around and decided what we were going to do for our budget, our mission. The next one, if we go to communication, more communication, we did brochures. Our tagline was the experience of a lifetime. And that's our new mission statement that we wrote underneath there. We did sermons that had to do with our mission-based budget. And so those were all the sermons that I did that regarded that. We did, of course, newsletters. We had our mission, we talked about our new budget in their orders of service and, of course, during our pledge campaigns. And lastly, our most recent, it happened to be our 30th anniversary. And so this is just an example of how we use mission-based budgeting to talk about our 30th anniversary, bring people together and talk about how it will look. I have materials, you can look at hard copy materials today, but one of the things I want to just show you is if you want to look at, just like you guys have, like hard copy pieces of things that we did. So we used a simple thing like this. Didn't cost us hardly anything, gave it to people to remind them of our mission. So little things like this, you can see these a little bit later. These are all going to be available, is that right? Yeah. So this can give you an idea of sort of how we showed it to our congregation. But I want you to just notice, and if you want to just do the next slide, the last slide, I just want you to notice how simple it was, okay? It's not a ton of reading, it's not 20 pages long, it's, you know, what do we do serving each other? What were our accomplishments? Now there were more than just one, but I wanted to make it short. And then realizing our dreams was, what do we want to do? And then the percentage. It was as simple as that. Our first year, our pledges went up 40%. 40. I'm not gonna say any more than that.
How about the next year?
Everyone that had increased their pledges, that year we tried to get people to double their pledges. No one dropped that doubled their pledge. We had a challenge grant, and they stayed at that level or went higher. No one dropped.
Well, thank you, Pal. Now it's your turn for your questions, thoughts, and feedback. You guys can just hold on a second. Pass it on. Okay.
So my chief question here is, one thing I'm unclear on is, did you plan your budget as a mission-based budget? Did you start with the fact that these are our programs and here's how much money we are looking to raise for them? Or is this just how you're presenting it? Because I've seen it presented before like that, but you know, we've always traditionally done a line item budget. And sometimes we presented it in stewardship as like a mission budget. It wasn't planned like a mission budget. So which was the way you all did it?
In our case, exactly what you just described. It started by just translating existing into here's what it looks like. Here's another picture of the budget. But then once you put it in that form, it gives you the ability, whether it's with the board of directors or the congregation, to think about priorities and do we want to change allotments? Do we want to spend more money on worship and less in some other area? Do we want to add an area that's not there? So getting it in, once it gets into that form, it's a little easier to think about everything that moves up, something else has to move down. The whole pie idea, right? So it allows you to maybe evaluate that stuff a little easier, but at the beginning it was simply a translation of the existing line item budget for us.
We do not translate, we start with mission and go back to, and then create our line items based on what we want to accomplish.
And we still have a line item budget, and we make that available to anyone who wants to see it. So we start with the line item budget and translate it.
We do have a line item budget, but that comes after, just to be clear. I mean, you have to have it.
I add one thing to that.
In the congregation that I served that made this switch, what happened was we took the budget as it had existed and changed it. And doing that, and we only had 4 sections of the budget, in doing that, decisions were made about the following year based on how people felt about the size of the pie slices.
Yeah.
So it was a little of each. In the first year, it was purely representation, and then it began to influence.
Right. Yeah, that's a good explanation. You have to start somewhere.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank all of you. I thought each one of your presentations dovetailed very nicely together and was complimentary, so thank you for your content. My first question is for Tricia, and then my second question is for the 3 of you collectively. You said something interesting about getting rid of the pledge drive, so I'd like you to elaborate on how that worked. And then the rest of you, in terms of communicating the mission-based, the missions and the mission-based, Marion, you had said something like you would have articles in the your newsletter, but I'm assuming that those articles were not about pledge drive is coming, but rather about changing lives, or about program, or about mission. And it's something, Mark too, you were alluding again to mission and mission. So will your communications be about that? And Lynn, you actually talked about that, but maybe you can add something. Those are my questions.
The question of moving away from an annual budget drive, an annual canvas, is a big one that I really can't address adequately here, and I will be talking about it a little bit at the workshop that's coming up at 3. There's a lot of research out there, and a lot of it exists outside the boundaries of Unitarian Universalism. So I guess that I just want to encourage us to remember that though there's lots of wisdom within our tradition, there is wisdom outside our tradition as well. And there are lots of reasons to conclude that the way we've been doing this with the annual canvas, starting over every year and happening at the same time every year, is a model that has served us well in the past and is serving us less well now and will probably serve us even less well in the future. So new models and experiments are good.
Do you have any references that you could share, you know, just in terms of outside?
I'd be happy to talk. Actually, you know what? There are quite a few on here.
Okay, great.
Quite a few on here, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about it later too.
As far as our communications, there was a mix of everything. You know, the pledge drive is coming. In some cases, we've communicated the way the mission affects individual or each area of programming affects individuals. We tried to get people to write us articles. In the past, we would have a big easel, you know, with a picture, and then, you know, something that they wrote, and we'd have that like on the way into the sanctuary, and each week a different member would be there, as well as the testimonials during the service. So, you know, we had a mix of everything. Oh, did you guys have?
Our congregation struggles with communication. We actually have a task force underway right now trying to figure out, are we communicating well, or could we do better? We've been newsletterless for a couple of years, which at some level was, newsletters are so hard. Content is hard, right? Even if you can get somebody to agree to edit and publish it, which can be a challenge, then the deadline comes and passes and no one gives them things to put in it. So it sort of went away because some people were done doing it and no one picked it up. Without that, it's been difficult to find channels to talk. You know, we've got an hour every Sunday morning, either in a sermon or what we might call a community moment, or some time when sort of a testimonial can happen. But doing year-round, thinking about this has been hard for us. We've struggled with it. It tends to happen over 3 months or a period of time, and then it's over until the next year. And it's hard to talk about it during the other 9 months for us, has been.
Thank you.
I think probably I've said quite a bit from, and those slides and some of the materials that we have on the web page. I think you'll find quite a bit of material there. So, and of course, you're welcome to contact me.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things we did, I served the church in San Antonio for many years, and we had something very creative, and one of the things we did is get people to do a 3-year commitment so that you don't have to do the same pledge drive every year. So you don't completely eliminate it, but at least it's like once every 3 years rather than every year.
So the comment was that about getting folks to make 3-year commitments when they make pledges. So instead of having to re-ask and get new commitments on an annual basis, it's happening periodically, and there's a longer window that a pledge is in.
Yes.
Along that line too, the PBS station here runs this interminable pledge drive. But what they do is they ask for a pledge, and then you can either send a check or you can put it on your credit card. And if you put it on your credit card, unless you change it, it continues year after year. So it doesn't go up, but you can change it up or down whenever you wish. But now that's a longer term commitment, because it doesn't have a bunch of money come in and then you gotta start over again every year. So it's an ongoing kind of commitment, which after all, our churches don't restart every March.
Yes, in the back, please. you in the white shirt.
Was there ever capital campaigns running concurrently with your ABD efforts?
Right now. The question was there ever a capital campaign running concurrently? And yes, and right now our yearly pledge drive is ending, and we started educating people about the capital campaign. We're having a vote tomorrow about whether to proceed with the capital campaign. So yes, and we have a UUA consultant, so Bill Klontz has been advising us about how to mesh. Now I'm currently the co-chair of the capital campaign. I've stepped off stewardship, but we are working with stewardship, and he's given us some tools to use on how to differentiate the two. And as a co-chair of the capital campaign team, I went before the congregation and told them, you know, this is the annual pledge drive, this is the capital, this is what it does, this is the capital campaign, this is what it does, and encouraged everyone to maintain your pledge because that's how we run the church. So it's difficult, but it can be done.
Can I add?
Yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
I'm just saying, I.
It needs to be on the recording.
It won't be on the video.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to address that specific issue because it's been quite a while since we've done a capital campaign, but the last one we did, we were very much concerned about exactly that issue. We were thinking, are we going to dilute either the annual giving or the capital campaign? What we found was, and what our consultant advised us was, is that if you have a capital campaign that people are excited about, you will probably find that they're giving more to the annual canvas than they did in the past because they're feeling more excited about the church in general. That did turn out to be the case for us. Since then, I've also learned one other thing about that I think makes a lot of sense to me, which is that when people give to something like a capital campaign, they think about giving in a different way. They don't think about what am I taking out of my monthly paycheck. They think more in terms of what am I taking out of money that I've set aside for some special purpose. Certainly when I contributed to our capital campaign, most of what I contributed was money that I had saved, not for any particular purpose, but just to have some savings. And so I felt good about being able to do that. I couldn't have done it every year, but I was glad to be able to do it at that time.
Back in the back.
Me?
Yes, you.
I have a question that kind of confuses me. I think probably we all do this, which is that at our annual meeting, the congregation votes on the budget. Okay, so at that annual meeting, do you present a budget that looks like that pie chart, or do you present what we still have, the line item budget? And I'm asking that because I think that most of the people that I know would be looking at it as if we were not providing them with enough information for them to vote.
So the question was about annual meetings and how budgets are presented there and how they're voted on at annual meetings. For us, our bylaws don't require a budget vote, so we can present various information at the meeting. We don't vote on it, but then there's usually what we call a budget detail meeting, which is a follow-up, usually a week or 10 days after the annual meeting. And that's for the folks who really want to get the full picture, want the whole spreadsheet, and want to look at the line item information.
We have both. During the annual meeting, we do not go through line by line, but the treasurer stays after so that if people want to ask questions about the detail, they can. You know, of course, we would answer during the meeting if there were any questions, but we present both.
And I'll add one other thing, which just is, as a former congregation president, we spent a lot of time sort of talking about trust. That idea that high trust organizations, you can do things that you can't do in low trust situations. And so when you're board president or you're the board and you're feeling like you can't get anything done because you can't be the congregation won't extend. They were willing to vote you into a position, but they're maybe not willing to trust anything that you do there. That can be an awkward situation to be in, and you end up spending a lot of time feeling like if they would just trust that we take our role seriously, we're educating ourselves, we're learning, we're trying to make the best decisions that we can, and obviously, in a UU organization where everybody wants to have a voice and sometimes feels entitled to have a voice, that can be a struggle.
So in my experience, what we do in our congregations when there is not enough trust is we tend to bring up more facts and more numbers. And while the transparency and all of that data is really important, I have yet to experience that helping. That's not the way trust is rebuilt, with more facts, which has always shocked me, but it just doesn't bad.
And I wanted to add too, she just jogged my memory that, when we're presenting information to the congregation, we try to appeal to their emotions, because, that's what they're going to base their decisions on, their money decisions. So, yeah, so that's what we do.
Okay, here in the front.
Being relatively new to UUs, I'm not sure if this is a common practice or not, but we have, I think it's very helpful. We always have a town hall meeting a couple of weeks before the annual meetings. Is that common practice? Because that's when, if they have any questions, by the time we get to the vote, everybody's already understood it very much.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, and I'm not looking for us to offer more information. It just would be a sudden shock if there wasn't, and people have been informed enough along the way that it's just the budget is there, and if they have a question, they ask. It's not that it's being described in detail. It just is kind of our common practice.
So John was just advocating for the idea of having a town hall meeting ahead of annual meetings, which would give a chance to let people look, let people ask questions, let people have some time to reflect before the meeting and a vote comes around after that.
We have, we have informational meetings when there's, kind of like that.
In case you didn't hear, she was talking about, having informational meetings periodically. And I wanted to add to that. Recently, we were coming up a little bit short a couple of months. And so the board made a decision that we needed to make some cuts. So one of the cuts they made was they cut half of the ministers, that's me, insurance, health insurance. So I wasn't going to get, for a couple of months they needed for me to pay half of my health insurance. And so once they made that decision, we immediately that Sunday after worship, we had an informational meeting to let people know that that's what had happened, and they just felt that they needed to keep them informed. And someone in the congregation said, that is not being true to our mission. That we're not supporting our own minister in, providing health care, and this is something that we believe everyone should have. And so people stepped up and volunteered, anonymously, I understand, I don't know who they were, and said, we will pay the extra until, we're in a better spot. But I don't think that would have happened if people weren't familiar with our mission and really understood that, social justice is important to us and that we believe in things like that. So that's just an example of keep your congregation informed, and it never hurts to have meetings and invite people to come to speak their minds.
Was there someone in the back here that do you have something?
Yes, I wanted to ask if you have any advice for how to make the next year's mission budget look different, be compelling. I feel like the ones that we've done for about 3 or 4 years now kind of look the same, and I think people might start to, I've seen this before, I'm not going to read it. Any suggestions?
Don't all speak at once.
Change the theme.
Yeah.
The question was about sort of stagnation and what the mission budget looks like or reads like, and how to change that up.
Yeah, that's why we went from the pie chart to the bars. And, you know, I talked about giving away pies and things, and what they did was give away different kinds of bars, like they baked bars, they had candy bars, and one Sunday they had like granola bars, and so they had a lot of fun with that.
I quickly stopped being a timekeeper, you notice that.
Yeah, we have about 2 minutes.
Okay, well, you can kiss it goodbye. No, I just wanted to say that one of the things that, it's not something we did consciously for that reason, but I think it has that effect, is that we now do out-year budgeting. I don't know how many of you do that, but our minister who puts together our budget presents it as it looks like a line item, but it's actually a mission-based budget because it's organized by mission, church missions. But he doesn't just give us his projection for this year, he looks out a couple of years. And that does force you to start shaking off what Mark was talking about, this idea that every year looks a little bit like the last year, because there's your chance to do some aspiring. Is right there where he's saying, here's where we are, but here's where we'd like to be.
Okay, I'll take that back now. Okay.
We're done.
You have something, Cliff?
Well, it's sort of an ad for the second workshop. But the answer to your question, sir, find a way to give more money away.